There's a lot of different things an action RPG can be, but obviously the most important one is good. I'm Falcon, and today on Game Ranks, the top 10 new action RPGs of 2017. Number 10 is Elex, which is an open-world science fantasy game that the publisher THQ Nordic calls edgy, dark, uncompromising, and complex. The game revolves around a resource called Elex, and a war going on in a post-apocalyptic world where people fight over this resource. There's swords, guns, and eventually magic, and in some ways it even kind of reminds me of BioShock, with the lead character being a member of a group who consumes Elex as a way to rid themselves of emotions and make decisions based on logic. However, his glider jet crashes, and he goes through withdrawals from Elex. Not exactly the same thing, obviously, and BioShock is not a big open world action RPG, but if you're a big fan, you can detect the little parallels in that statement alone. Not sure if it'll end up actually mirroring BioShock in that way, but it's an intriguing title nonetheless. Number 9, The Surge is a game that plays in a way similarly to Dark Souls, but is also inspired by Rise of the Robots, which is interesting because that's an old fighting game from the mid-1990s that wasn't exactly beloved among critics, but it was actually a fun game. Just very different and not necessarily perfect. It has a great combat system that allows for targeting of various body parts, and that's kind of, in my opinion, the highlight of the game, but features levels of customization that are also very interesting. There's a modular upgrade system for the exoskeleton that you use throughout the course of the game, and to have a game that plays so much like Dark Souls not seem like a ripoff of Dark Souls, I think really seems like an accomplishment to me. Just because you have gameplay that doesn't sound like it would slot into that style, that does actually rather well. The exosuits actually augment the Souls style gameplay incredibly well. And if I'm gonna be completely honest, I think this game is underrated. It is a really damn fun game. Number 8 is Middle-earth Shadow of War, the sequel to Shadow of Mordor, which the developer has promised that this time around it's going to be much bigger and much more complex. They've really taken to describing the first one as their Terminator and Shadow of War as their T2, which has me enthusiastic because I enjoyed the first Middle-earth game. It's a good game. Is it the best game? No, but if it is indeed that kind of jump in quality, then Shadow of War is easily going to be one of the better games of the year. The big thing that I think matters is their focus shifting from hack and slash to action RPG, while still maintaining the Nemesis system that actually was pretty cool. It just really got overblown in marketing. It's a sequel that continues the story of the original game. If you're interested, I am, not only from a gameplay perspective, but just to see how a Middle-earth game can do without any actually new Lord of the Rings media coming out. Even on that level, it's at least something I want to see happen, and if it turns out to be as good as they're saying it is, that's good for every gamer who likes Lord of the Rings. Number 7 is Tales of Berseria, which, if you are a JRPG fan, or specifically a fan of Tales, you know this is a good game. And it came out in January, which is a weird time to release, especially when it turns out to be an action RPG, kinda. I mean, it's more of an action RPG than other Tales games. It uses the Liberation linear motion battle system, a new variation on the same concept that gives you a little bit more freedom of movement and makes battles more fluid, but it still requires the understanding of a more full-blown JRPG, and it does a great job of melding the type of gameplay of a more traditional JRPG with action. So it doesn't necessarily give up the complexity of a full-blown JRPG, and it absolutely gives you the type of characters you'd expect as well as the type of world. In fact, it takes place in the distant past of Tales of Zestiria, but honestly, the thing that really shines in this game is the characters. And to have a game where the mechanics are this entertaining, where you say the real highlight is the characters, this is a really damn good game. Number 6 is Vampyr, a branching action RPG where you play as a doctor who has, contracted the vampire. It takes place during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic in London, and the story revolves around his internal struggle with having taken the Hippocratic Oath and being an undead vampire. Do you maintain that Hippocratic Oath, or do you kill innocents? Or do you only kill evil people? These are dark themes, but it takes place in a dark time. Honestly, I think this is going to be one of the best games of the year. I mean, assuming the game is actually fun. The concept sounds so good to me. I can't wait to try it. Number 5 is Nier Automata, and I think people know my opinion on this game by now. This is my favorite game of the year, period. I love this game. This is such a good game. I have not had an experience that got me as excited and drawn in as Nier Automata, and that is because it manages to blend so many different types of games at all times. It just drops you into random sequences that are just something that you remember from some game, and you're like, what is this? This game is deep. It has got multiple endings, and until you see all of them, you haven't actually beaten the game. It shares that with Oxenfree, in my opinion. However, this is a much more exciting game. It plays like Bayonetta if Bayonetta was an RPG and industrial and cybernetic and fantasy and science fiction and just all over the place. And yet it works, and it works perfectly. If you haven't played this game, do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Number 4, and this one is up there with Nier for me, but Nioh. I don't know how we managed to get multiple offshoots of Souls, multiple games inspired by the Souls series, and not only have them both work out to be good, but basically both work out to turn this into its own little subgenre of action RPG. Because Nioh is not a clone by any means. It certainly mirrors some of the gameplay of Souls, but it manages to be its own game in so many ways, least of which is the dark fantasy Sengoku period it takes place in, and oddly enough created by the same people who developed Dead or Alive and Ninja Gaiden. In my opinion, Team Ninja spent a long time learning about a lot of different kinds of gameplay over the years, and they used all of that experience in the format of a Souls-style action RPG. And say what you will about the premise of the plot, I don't know if I'd consider it great, but it's good, and the game itself is phenomenal. Number 3 is Destiny 2, which, as you know, starts off with all of the experience that Bungie accrued over making Destiny into a good game. Now, Bungie has made a couple of controversial decisions. However, despite that, I want to point out how good Destiny became after a not very good launch. Bungie kind of understands what people want out of Destiny now, and has been doing a lot more to give them exactly what that is. Namely, a cinematic story that's actually interesting, and something that isn't just random on-the-fly matchmaking. Between clans and so-called guided games, this should actually work for what we wanted it for, and that sounds good to me. Number 2 is Horizon Zero Dawn, and let's just go ahead and say it, this is the open world game that every open world game has wanted to be. The thing that kind of blows my mind about Horizon is that it contains so many of the conventions of the open world game without sucking. In fact, it actually manages to provide reasons for these conventions to exist within the game world, previously thought impossible to do, and pulls it off in this incredibly dense, rich environment that is just full of life and requires so many different styles and approaches, as well as just giving you an interesting game world to live in. This is one of those games where it's just almost impossible to dislike. You never run out of stuff to do, and you never feel like you're in an empty, lifeless area like a lot of open world games end up doing. Also, regardless of whether you do not like Aloy's name, I don't really. Her character development, and really just everyone's character development, keeps you involved in this game in a way that I would expect to be in a game that didn't focus on mechanics as much as this one does. But it does, and it's great. And finally, number 1, Zelda Breath of the Wild. How can you not mention this game if you're talking action RPGs? This is the latest and possibly most innovative of pretty much what most people trace a lot of the action RPG game ideas back to. It was certainly not the first by any means, but Legend of Zelda definitely standardized the genre, and it has continued to through the years, bringing out emergent gameplay into what was previously a fairly linear game. Breath of the Wild simplified simplifies all of the stuff that you can do on your end, but at the same time opens the entire world to allow you to come up with new things to do. In my opinion, that kind of gameplay incorporated into a story-driven RPG situation where it actually manages to be both types of games at once. Instead of sandbox now, RPG now, the novelty is kind of always on. And it's really just one of those games that charms the ever-loving hell out of you the entire way through. Horizon is maybe a little bit more dense, but Zelda also manages to capture that feeling of a real living world in a way that Horizon, I think, excels at over most other games in this genre. I mean, to have gotten basically the two best open world action RPGs in a decade over the span of a couple of months is pretty amazing. And a quick bonus game for you, Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord. The game takes place 200 years before Warband and is intended to upgrade all the game's systems from inventory to artificial intelligence. We only mention it as a bonus because we don't know for sure it's coming this year. They've only listed 2017 as the release date, and still it's TBA as far as when. But we do want Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord very badly. Which out of these action RPGs are you most excited for, or out of the few that have already come out, which is your favorite? Talk about it in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is a subscription. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on Game Ranks.